So now I've got a cuttings compost, and that's okay as a seed compost. The principle of the compost is trying to just get the distribution equal, so I'm making sure I get down to the bottom. If I do try and flip it over like a pancake a little bit, that's just making sure it's thoroughly mixed in, the leaf mould and the vermiculite. And that's my seed mix. So that's the cuttings mix and the seed mix. And yeah, if I've got a larger seeds to sow, I could actually add some grit. If they're really large seeds, I might actually add some soil. So that's things like peas, courgettes or squash, anything which is a huge great seed like broad beans. They can handle a little bit of soil even in the seed mix. But I'll leave it without for now and move on to the third one, which is, this is going to be a kind of base which I will add stuff to. So the leaf mould is the base of it again, and I can add nearly as much soil as there is leaf mould. Let's look at the percentages. What should I be adding? So this is to create potting on young initially. So a bit of leaf mould, a bit of topsoil, a bit of compost. So I've got some compost, so a little bit of compost. It's about 20-25% of that. And this, I'm not going to add the perlite and vermiculite to yet. I'm just going to stir those two together. So that's soil, compost, and predominantly leaf mould. About half of it is leaf mould still. And what we're thinking about here is, if we have a young seedling that's been raised in the seed mix and is now ready to pot on, which would be similar to these, which are poached eggplants, they've been growing for a month or two, they need potting on into their own individual pot. They don't need much fertility at that stage, and that would be fine to pot them into. Now, the reason I didn't add perlite and vermiculite at that stage is we've also got the option of customising this mix. So again, when you buy a multi-purpose compost, it will have long-term slow-release fertiliser in it, which won't stop seeds germinating, but will kick in after a couple of months and feed the young plant once it's germinated and is growing on. So it's a delayed action fertiliser. But if we're actually making our own mixtures, then we can tailor it specifically to the type of plant that we're potting on. So if I'm potting on cabbages or onion seedlings, I'll add a bit of the calcified seaweed, mix that in. For general plant growth and stimulation, the panacea of seaweed meal. And again, a little bit isn't going to hurt anything. But if I've got a large plant like a tomato or pepper that is going to go to fruition in this mixture, then I'd add quite a bit of seaweed if I've got it available. If I'm growing a leafy crop like lettuces, I might add some of this, which is dried blood. And that's a strange colloidal material. It's got flat particles. You have to break it down, mix it up, make sure it's not in lumps. That's true of all these materials. They don't want to be added in big lumps. So that would be specifically for nitrogen growth, which is leaf growth, which is lettuces, things like that. Too much of all these things, you could actually overfeed a young plant. And then the other things I've got here, you can get blood, fish and bone, but there is a difficulty. It's not often purely organic. This stuff, chicken manure, that's quite common nowadays in garden centres, a bit costly. It comes in pellets, and that's because they want to spread it with a machine. So that's for bigger distribution. Because it's in pellets, initially when it goes into this mixture, it's not going to be equally distributed. There's going to be little lumps of it left in the soil. As soon as that gets wet or moist, it'll crumble up and break down into a powder and it'll mix in. So some of these stronger materials, I wouldn't use the material, the potting on compost, straight away. I'd save it for a couple of days until that process of these things breaking down a bit has happened. I've also got bone meal, so that's got lots of potash in it, and that would be good for fruit. Hoof and horn, that's slower release fertiliser. So if I've got something that I'm going to put in a pot and leave there for 6 months or a year, I put some of the hoof and horn meal in. And then volcanic rock dust, that's even longer term. So I've got some trees upstairs here, fruit trees, and they're going to be in the same pot for about 3, 4, 5 years or more. And this volcanic rock dust will gradually break down over the course of several years, releasing trace elements and minerals. So a little bit of that would be good. And then if we go for it, if we want to save money, here's my little bits of hair, and that would be similar to the hoop and horn or the volcanic rock dust. It's made of keratin, which is nitrogen protein, and it'll take a long while for it to break down, but eventually those will break down and feed the plant again in 2, 3, 4 years. And the bits of old carpet or wool shoddy, which is a similar natural product, I know that's going to break down a rotted carpet. Now what I've got is all those lovely extra things, and this is now not so good for potting on the young seedling, but it would be great for final potting on into a bigger bucket of these large fruiting plants like peppers and tomatoes and cucumbers, which we can grow in containers. But the problem now is they're in the material, but they're not fully mixed in. So this is the stage at which I'm going to bring a bit of perlite and a bit of vermiculite in, which will help rooting and aeration in the mixture. And crucially, if I mix now, if I keep mixing until the perlite and vermiculite are equally distributed in that mixture, then I know that also the concentrates are equally distributed throughout the mixture. So it's a visible check that I've done enough mixing. I won't carry on and do endless mixing. And yeah, the final quality of perlite and vermiculite is when you put things into this, it looks kind of professional. So whereas just dark materials, you don't know quite what's in them, with a little bit of the lighter, fluffy white and gold perlite and vermiculite, yeah, it looks a bit more convincing if you're trying to give them away or pass them on or even sell them. So that's that process of making mixes, and yeah, I've gone through the different stages. This one is cuttings. This one at the moment is small seeds. If I had a bit of soil, maybe a bit more leaf mould, that would be for larger seeds, but pricking out, which is when you raise lots of seeds in a tiny space and then you prick them out into a larger either tray or individual pots. And then, yeah, for potting on young seedlings, that would be without concentrates, just the base mix without the extra concentrates. But I've gone to the last one on the list, which is potting on mature plants. And also, yeah, if you were using raw materials, like if your compost hadn't broken down, it was young, 6 months or less, and also if you're using manure, at the moment this manure is too lumpy to put in there, but I can chop it up and add that in. But in those cases, you might be introducing, say, fly eggs or something nasty, a macroorganism, which if you make this up as a houseplant mixture, and then you've got some fly eggs in the compost, then you'll be bringing them into your house as well. So again, it's worth being thorough and having a backlog of these bulky materials, which then allows you to store them for longer until they're really settled and not going to cause any knock-on problem later on. So that's part one of the first half. Any comments or questions or thoughts about that? The problem is you haven't got a source of leaf mould or manure or compost yet, but I'm saying it's good practice to pay attention to these materials. Chris has just brought in a whole ton of topsoil or a whole lorry load or something, and it's taking it that seriously. If you've got the space to store these materials up, then try to get hold of them. There are little alternatives like, yeah, there's more collecting of leaves and storage of these now. In Weston Park, if you go around there, they used to just dump all the old leaves in the middle of the rhododendron glade, and they had a big pile, and they didn't value it, they just left it. So I was able to go in and get several bags full, and it was several years old. Now when they redid Weston Park, I actually had a bit of a say, and one of the suggestions was that they create leaf mould bays. So now they've got 3 or 4 massive leaf mould bays, and they put the leaves in there, and then they use the leaf mould for mulch. So they're completing the cycle. Instead of buying more stuff in and throwing what they've got away, they've actually completed that cycle and are doing a better job there. Okay.